Morning. I've thought about this time together over and over and over again. And every time I thought about it, I started at a different place and ended at a different place. But I knew that when I got up here, it was going to be whatever it is, and that my ability to anticipate it was a waste of time. And so I quit thinking about it till now. So I guess I best get back on board and think about what we're going to do here today. But given that, I usually like to help people understand something about that. Before the day's over, I will have told you more than I know. You ever done that? You really talked about a subject and you began to wander off into parts of the subject that you really didn't know all that well, but you went there anyway because people were watching you and they wanted you to go there for whatever reason. And I also have let people know that I was educated beyond my intelligence. So I don't want that to get in the way either. Now, some people would say, well, that's defacing or self-effacing, or that's a negative. I hope before today is over that we're going to begin to discover that a new day and age better start dawning soon, or we're going to be facing some problems in our world that are becoming relatively unsolvable because we're too slow in responding. And that we may have a blind spot. That in that blind spot we're undermining ourselves and those around us. But in any case, what I want to look at today is toward a more livable and sustainable future. Knowing that's only partially up to you. If enough of your neighbors are not living in a sustainable way, guess what's going to happen to you? I was asking somebody before we started, I said, do you have such a thing as climate believers or climate change believers and climate change deniers? Because we certainly do in the States. And those two worlds are really two different worlds. Apparently looking at the same data, same information, one would say, no problem. It's always changed. Well, of course it has. It isn't the issue that it's changing, it's the rate that it's changing and how it's changing. And if we're not careful, we were making assumptions when we built most of our cities near water and near the coastlines. It never occurred to anybody that the water levels would ever rise to ruin those cities at all. We just assumed the world was relatively stable enough that you didn't have to worry. Now all of a sudden, well, maybe we're going to have to take another look. How soon do you have to look, though, and make some changes before the changes will be made for you? I've often asked people, they've talked about the San Andreas Fault forever in California. And I said, well, what happens when several million people move inland from the edge? And nobody ever seems to have an answer. The assumption is, well, hasn't happened yet, therefore it never will. That's one way of playing it. Get or understand or want to know more about, because we didn't have time to cover it, I'm going to be available by Skype or Uvu or whatever kind of fancy stuff you have. I work with about 3 different things, but I'll be glad to download it. I want to really say I'm committed to being here not just today for each of you. I'm here until I quit breathing for those that want to go there. And I say that in all honesty to you, with all authenticity. If you want to go there and you think I have something to offer to you to get there, then I want you to consider it yours. It's part of the price of admission, but it would have been yours minus that price of admission anyway. You with me? But you have to take responsibility to let me know, because I don't know what's going on inside your head. But I am committed to you, trying to make any way I can be of help to you to get where you want to go. I'm sincere about that. So, learn to ask questions in different ways. I always find that the first way you formulate a question is not necessarily the best. And most people are not used to rethinking their questions and asking them in different ways. But literally, you can take any question And if you will practice asking the question more than one way, guess what happens when it comes to thinking of solutions? You will think of more than one solution, because each way of formulating the question creates in your mind, in its own effort to answer your question, a different way to think about it. That is at the core of creativity. Children ask a lot of, what is the number one question that almost children worldwide will tend to ask? They don't ask it in our language, but what does a little child want to ask constantly? Why? It's innate to ask why. Anybody know the universal answer, however? They also have the answer. 'Cause. Just 'cause. And that is the universal answer. Most of us are living our lives somewhere between the question why and 'cause. 'Cause why? Well, because it's the best I now know. Because it matches the books I'm now reading. Or it matches the job description I now have. Just because somebody else could come into your job and think of a more creative way to do it. Does that make you dumb? No, it just means they were asking a different question in a slightly different way about how to get the job done. But we have that tendency to think because, unfortunately, Brom, people go to school and the teachers ask them one question in a certain way, and you're supposed to find the answer in a certain way that matches the way the teacher asks the question. Very few teachers keep asking you to ask the question in different ways. Would that be fair? I don't want to misrepresent our educators. Since my grandson are one, and are there other educators in the room besides these guys over here? Well, do what you can to help them both. They need it. Discover there usually is more than one answer. There's very few questions for which there is only a single answer, especially when you get in a world that we've created, and we're getting further and further away from saying use a hammer to hit the nail on the head. That usually has one good answer. I've had lots of bruised thumbs, though, from not hitting the nail correctly, bouncing off and hitting myself. There's more than one answer. Use your innate, the creative interchange, I will use the word CI, capacity to generate alternative answers. I want you to discover that you have multiple answers in you at any given moment. Together, we have more multiple answers. The problem we have then, if we get too many multiple options, is we can't agree on which one we're going to settle on, right? Mm-hmm. We tend to get in each other's way. And so that's one of the keys we have to learn how to do. I think in the Chicken Conspiracy, one of the sentences, which is the only one I remember from the book, is that all of us are smarter than any one of us if, and only if, we don't get in each other's way. But we have a way to, there's a lot of studies in group dynamics that show that if you added up the IQ of anybody around the table, all of them were smarter than the group was. Because the group the dynamics were such that we negated and canceled each other out, and our ultimate IQ as a group was lower than the IQ of any one of us sitting there. Now, if you have a highly trained, skilled group, however, a group IQ will be higher and able to do things an individual can't do. But the key is, how do we work together to get those answers? And the key would be get out of each other's way. So notice that some answers introduce more questions. You ever do that? You get an answer, or you think you got an answer to something, the next thing you know, you answer that and you find out you got another question. And that's quite often the case. And so what is your criteria for choosing one answer over another? So what do you do if you got multiple things in your head? And so a lot of times you get sort of polarized in your own head. Well, this is good, and well, yeah, but so is this. This has got, and you ever hear that argument go on in your head? How many of you talk to yourself periodically? In your head. It's called internal dialogue, self-talk.
Please be quiet, I'm talking to myself.
Good. Now the question is, who's listening to that conversation? I'm serious. Think about that for a moment. Who hears the dialogue? We're going to go back and look at that harder today. I want you to understand there's two parts of you. We've educated and worked on one part of you, but very few people have worked on the other. Are you familiar that more and more, have you ever heard the word mindful or mindfulness? Is that a word that's become familiar? Well, we're learning that from the East. They always said when I was growing up, East and West would never meet. Well, East and West are meeting now, but not just because people go visit each other in different countries. Where we're actually learning to meet now is found in what are called MRIs, or the ones where they look inside your head. They've been studying people from different cultures and looking at how our minds work. East is now teaching us something about, quote, mindfulness. And we all were born with it. We were all born that way back before we learned to quit listening to it. I'm hoping that before we leave here today, you'll have a new respect and appreciation and experience of that part of yourself. Whether you choose to develop it from this day forward is your choice. I can only tell you from my point of view, it's made the last 15 years of my life radically different. And I've been excited about what it's been able to do for me. As you all know, I think I'm in pretty good shape for a guy who's only 35. Well, maybe 36. I can't remember. So, you will get questions answered sooner or later, and that's what I meant by my previous statement. I'm committing to help you explore to find an answer to any question we generate here. If I don't have an answer, I will try to do my best to help you, and or together we'll find one, or at least discover that nobody else has an answer for it either. Does that make sense? Now, how many of you believe me when I say that? Few. Well, I hope you do, because it's true. I will wait with bated breath and coated tongue to see what happens. So, what's this all about? Where did it come from? The current work that I'm working on is based on the 60-year legacy of my mentor, Dr. Henry Nelson Wyman, who was a scholar, teacher, mentor, and friend. I was introduced to Wyman's thoughts back in 1952. But when I was in 1952, I was a sophomore in college. And I don't know if you know anything about sophomores in college, but they are probably the most brilliant, all-knowing, sophisticated, smart people on the planet. And so when I was introduced to his thought, I basically took one look at it, decided I knew more than he did, and wrote it up. And for 15 years, I never looked back. Mr. Wyman was not on the horizon for me. And then I had occasion to meet him in 1966. And from that moment on, I learned from and worked with Dr. Wyman until his death in 1975. The only difference is now I don't look back on the time before I met him, only the time since I have known him. An amazing amount of thought. One of the brilliant people I've met. Any questions about this? What you're getting now is my add-ons and or an understandings of what Wyman had to say as of 1975. But I have the benefit of neuroscience and a variety of other things that we now know that were never available to Henry. The only thing I can say is I've never read anything yet that still contradicts him. Now, does that mean I'm totally caught in blinders? I usually check it out with other people who aren't looking through the same set of glasses to make sure I'm not being blinded.